In case you missed it, here's a Sports Animal Rewind.
Let's talk college football. It's time for the Sports Page Summer of College Football, presented by Buddy Gregg RVs and Motorhomes. Our daily preview of teams and conferences around the country for the upcoming college football season. Find Buddy Gregg RVs and Motorhomes on their Facebook page, their website at buddygregg.com, and follow them on Twitter at Buddy Gregg RVs. Now, let's take a full conference look at the American Athletic, formerly the Big East.
And to help us with that, we bring in from the Orlando Sentinel and the Sun Sentinel. You can find his work on Twitter. It's OS Matt Murschel, Murschel, and covering the American Athletic Conference to help us with our preview today. Matt joins us here on the New Sentinel Sports Page. Hey, Matt, Vince, and Brendan here in Knoxville. How you doing, Matt?
Pretty good. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great. First off, real quick, you have something in common with my partner, Brendan Quinn.
Huh.
I think both of you recently have been in a race car going around the track. What was that experience like for you? It frightened the heck out of Brendan. How was it for you, Matt?
It was kind of terrifying at times. I got a chance to take a lap in the pace car at the Daytona International Speedway for both the 500 and the Coke Zero 400. And I tell you, when they get in those turns and you get that wall right up against you, it's a little terrifying, and especially when you're holding a video camera trying to record it.
Absolutely correct. for no one, because I felt like a punk. Because especially when Biffle tells me, yeah, we'd be going about twice this speed if it were in a normal race, and I tell him I'm looking at the wall going by me that literally has former accidents splattered on the wall, and I could reach out the window and lose my hand. Yeah, people don't have a true appreciation unless you've been in there. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Matt, how many of your readers do you think could actually name all the teams in the American Athletic Conference?
Oh man, I think probably maybe a little more than half. It just seems like you need a roadmap nowadays to figure out who's in what conference, and especially when you look at the American Athletic Conference, Conference USA, the Sun Belt. I mean, this off season, the changes were so plentiful. I mean, you really don't know who's where and what team is in which conference, and it's almost to the point of being so confusing that I'm really glad that conference realignment is kind of slowed down now.
And Matt, as a beat writer, how do you feel about being in a league that stretches from Connecticut to Florida to Dallas?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's something that it was a good move for our school, UCF, to jump into the American Athletic Conference because, as much as everyone kind of hem and hawed about it and really wanted the UCF to kind of make a bigger move, I think this is the right move. I think, obviously there's a potential to have some good battles, some good games, some good rivalries established. And then there's the financial aspect of it as well. This conference is going to generate money. It's not going to generate as much money as the Big Five conferences, but it is still going to be, I think, pretty financially viable in the future.
So for our listeners, here are the 10 teams in the American Athletic Conference. Obviously Louisville, who most people are talking about. We'll get to them in 1 second. Cincinnati, Butch Jones's old school. Rutgers, UCF, USF, South Florida and Tampa. Connecticut, Houston, SMU. We'll visit with June Jones coming up in about 15 minutes. He will join us here on the show. Memphis and Temple. Matt, let's get back to Louisville. How much farther ahead is Louisville than everyone else? What's the gap between Louisville and the rest of the conference?
I think it's a pretty substantial gap. I mean, we saw what Louisville was able to do, last season. You know the kind of talent level that Teddy Bridgewater brings in at quarterback, and you know that Charlie Strong, in my mind, is probably one of the top up and coming coaches in college football. So I think all the pieces are in place for Louisville to make a really strong run, this season. And I think when you look at the rest of the conference, I think there's a pretty substantial gap between them and the number 2 team in the league.
In terms of legitimizing, I guess, the conference moving forward, how big would it be? How important is it for someone to maybe jump up and maybe not beat Louisville out for the title, but just beat them? If Cincinnati can beat them on the first day of the last game of the year, and maybe knock them out of a BCS situation and a championship situation, I feel like there'd be no love lost in the American if that were to happen.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if a Cincinnati or UCF or somebody were to upset Louisville sometime during the season, I think that would be a huge victory just for the sense of the league moving forward. Everyone knows that Louisville is going to head to the ACC next year. So I think obviously if you were to make that statement, if you were to come in and beat a team, especially on their turf as well, that would be just kind of maybe a little parting shot to say, listen, we understand you're making a move to kind of better yourself, but we're still a viable league. We still feel like we're going to do some big things. And to get a win like that against a team who more than likely will be a top 25 team throughout most of the year, that's a big feather to put in your cap.
Visiting with Matt Murschel, the Orlando Sentinel and the Sun Sentinel, covers the UCF Knights, but also the American Athletic Conference here on the New Sentinel Sports page. Joining us, Brendan Quinn, Vince Ferrara. What do you think about those two? If you could, quick hit on first Cincinnati, Butch Jones's old school, and the transition. What will be different, you think, with now Tommy Tuberville at the helm?
Well, I think, Tommy Tuberville's an interesting hire for them. He comes in and he's got some experience. He's been in the SEC. He's been in the Big 12. He kind of knows what it takes to win at certain levels. So I think he's going to bring that to the Cincinnati team. I think you're going to see an up-tempo type team. I think you're really going to, see a team that's going to try to push the ball down the field and try to, wear down some defenses. I think he's an interesting hire, and I think Cincinnati's an interesting team. They've been there the last couple of years. They've been around the top, and I think they're a team that, they've got some of the pieces, but if everything kind of gels right, they're going to make a strong push. Again, like I said, I still think they're behind a Louisville, but they could probably be a number 2 team in the conference.
In terms of, developing an identity, things like that, how much chatter around the league is there surrounding kind of the importance of starting to establish, and some really strong embedded rivalries? Obviously the big one, the obvious ones being UCF and USF, and then Houston and SMU, kind of hitting the ground running, really promoting them, I guess, as much as possible this year.
Well, I think it's big. I think, the commissioner has talked a lot about that, talked really about establishing some of these rivalries. That's really what's going to drive this league. If you just got teams all across the country or down the East Coast and there's there isn't some sort of common thread between these schools, you're not going to generate as much interest. I think when you have a rivalry, UCF and USF, for instance, as you mentioned, Houston and SMU, I think that kind of gets the fan bases excited. I think you want to see those games, and I think that's what needs to happen in this league. I think you need to have some of those games where realistically, you get the fans' interest with, man, I can't wait to see Cincinnati take on, Rutgers, or Cincinnati take on Louisville, or, you want to see those things established. I think it's definitely an important piece of what they're trying to do. And I think Michael Resco, the commissioner, has talked about that and really is kind of wants to push that forward, at least for the next couple of years, as this conference really tries to reestablish itself with a new brand.
Matt, if you could, quick hit on those two teams. South Florida is my alma mater. You're right there in Orlando with the UCF. Quick hit on UCF, what you think about them, and then USF.
I think UCF's going to have a pretty strong season this year. They're one of those teams that has kind of been, it's either kind of hit or miss. One year they're either really good or one year they're really bad. I think this year they're going to be really good. I think, they've got some strong offensive pieces. I feel like a quarterback, Blake Bortles, is probably the best quarterback in the state of Florida right now. I think he's the guy that has the pieces around him with some strong wide receivers. Their biggest question is going to be defense, whether their defense is young and whether they can step forward and kind of make the plays. On the other end of the spectrum, you look at USF. They've got a new head coach in Willie Taggart. He's a very high energy, highly motivated type guy. I think he's going to bring a lot of enthusiasm to that program. But realistically, he's starting, I wouldn't say from scratch, but he's really got a lot of rebuilding to do in the next couple of years. And he's going to do that by recruiting the state of Florida really hard, which he's done so far really well. I think that will help him down the road. But I think the Bulls have a little ways to go.
When you look at this league getting kind of off and running early on, and you see some of the key non-conference games, I mean, is there anything that you have circled as potential updates or upsets that could get the league some attention? I mean, you have the games like UConn, I believe, hosts Michigan. Temple goes to Notre Dame. I think UCF has Penn State and South Carolina. USF has Michigan State and Miami. SMU has some of the Texas schools. Yeah, any of those, any early games that you think could maybe get the league a little bit of attention, a little bit of swagger, anything like that?
Well, I like UCF at Penn State. I really think that I know it's on the road, but I think the Knights really kind of have the potential maybe to possibly pull an upset off there. Penn State has, they're going through obviously their second year under the NCAA sanctions. They've got a new quarterback they're trying to develop with Bill O'Brien working there. So I think UCF has a potential to go in and steal a game there. I mean, again, that same weekend, Louisville travels to Kentucky. I think I think Louisville's way better than Kentucky. But again, anytime you beat an SEC team, and it's a rivalry game, I think that can do well for the league itself to kind of build it up as much. Other than that, Arkansas and Rutgers down the road a little bit. I think that's a game that, Arkansas is going through a lot of transition. They're trying to probably establish themselves under Brett Bielema. I think if Rutgers can somehow pull up a win, again, against a team in a conference like the SEC, I think that would go very far to kind of promote the American Conference.
Matt, just a quick word on Memphis. Are they going to have more tough times?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're trying to get there. I think Justin Fuente, him as a hire was a good hire, but I just think it's one of those things. The program is just going to go through some tough times, maybe for a couple more years before they start maybe trying to get some pieces together.
Matt, real quick, just your thoughts on how you maybe top three finishers in this league. You like Louisville 1. You said maybe Cincinnati 2. What would be a 1, 2, 3 order for the league?
I think Rutgers would be third, and then with UCF probably right behind them. Again, there's so much with some of these teams still kind of developing. UCF has to develop their defense. If their defense steps forward a little bit, I think they could make a strong push. But Rutgers and Cincinnati maybe could flip-flop at 2 and 3, but I think that's going to be your top 4 going into the season.
Matt, I'm looking at the UCF schedule. My question is, will you be making the trip to Temple on November 16th?
I'm not sure about that. I help out a lot too, covering with Florida and with Florida State as well. So it depends on what the game is there. I'm definitely pushing for it, but again, that's above my pay grade, so it's someone else's decision to decide. So I would like to be honest with you.
Matt, you're already pushing for the trip to Ireland with UCF and Penn State, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm on a long list of people who want to make that trip. So we'll see how that goes.
Good stuff. Matt Murschel joining us from the Orlando Sentinel, the Sun Sentinel. You can follow him on Twitter. It's at OSMATTMURSCHEL for more on the American Athletic Conference.